Hello, everyone. I'm Kendra Ann Sherrill. I am the Production Services Coordinator with Washington Filmworks, and I'm here today with Doug Hostetter and Damian Payne, and we're going to chat a little bit about working on set during this time of COVID. For those of you who don't know, Washington's film industry does have the green light to go back to work. Productions can resume in any county that is phase 2 or above, and if they follow the set safety guidelines that have been issued by the governor's office. And you two have been working on these sets recently, and so I'm excited to chat with you about your experiences. If you could just introduce yourselves first a little bit and about what you do, that would be great. Damian, we'll start with you.
So I'm a first assistant director, and so I obviously am the guy that sort of runs the madness on set.
And Doug?
I am a director of photography, so I am the guy who tries to take the director's vision and communicate that to the crew, or at least part of the crew. Yes.
Well, perfect. Well, thank you guys so much for being here and chatting with me. That's a perfect segue, Doug, into my first question. So we're in this new era of filmmaking, right? And so I just wanted to see how you guys have found creative solutions to sort of bring the director's, vision to life, but also trying to stay as safe as possible. I know that's probably a really tricky balance right now.
I'll jump in. So Damian can piggyback off this because he's all about this process. And we talked about this earlier in that the old film process is more important than ever in terms of following a procedure so that everyone knows what's going to happen and then they can communicate accordingly. So on the first big job I had back, the first union job I had back, the director DP was not there. I was actually just an operator. So on a scout, we did use some new technology to help the process I took my phone with the Artemis setting and was able to basically stream the scout. And it was very helpful for taking both scouting pictures with the director DP there. Well, they're virtually and able to chime in on that. So we were at least able to start out the process kind of knowing where the director wanted to go. So that's the big thing, is trying to figure out what's in his head. And he was able to actually see my Artemis on my phone and then comment. So that worked, and it worked out really well. Without that, I don't know how we would have made it through the day.
Damian, have you utilized in your role any form of digital or new technologies, I guess, that makes it a little easier?
So I've only had one set where we had the set stream. So it was I think it's actually called Set Stream, Kelsey and Thatcher's sort of set streaming solution. And that worked great. Very little delay. And it actually has a text feature in it. And that was good because it definitely helped with the crowding of monitors. And it meant that departments that weren't on set could be watching and seeing, sort of playing along. That particular location was really challenging because we were in a very small room, and so the social distancing was hard there. But because we had that, I was able to adjust wardrobe under the guidance of the wardrobe person, and things like that, which I know you're not meant to do, but it's so difficult. Every like place a location is going to dictate how you can adhere to the best practices, and you have to kind of make judgment calls. So clearly it's not ideal that I'm breaking a pod or a zone and touching wardrobe, but sanitize your hands, touch the wardrobe, sanitize your hands, be wearing a mask and all that. But it does mean that at least that wardrobe person isn't having to come in to a small space and risk themselves where they don't necessarily have to.
There's the perception that having less people will be safer. And I think that's sometimes true, but I do think those fewer people will be more mixed. So, in other words, if there's
really difficult.
If there's only 2 people on set, now you're just doing everything. And that's kind of the way it is in camera. And here's what the fix has been. And I don't think anyone thinks this is the solution, but what they've done is said, okay, the only person that can be in there is the cameraman. and they're going to do sound, and they're going to light it themselves, and they're going to do all the art. And that's not a very good solution in my mind. I know it's been happening a lot.
But yeah, the set streaming thing, that's kind of my thing. It's like, that's the thing that I feel on a lot of jobs is not being used when it should be. So yeah, I would like to see that go from, and we talked about this a little bit before we started, I would like to see that going from a best practice to like some kind of mandatory thing on the state guidelines, where it's like, if it's a crew of like whatever the number we agree on makes sense or more, it's mandatory. And in that way, a producer doesn't have to worry. It's like, I just got to buy, this is something we're going to have to spend money on. And it doesn't become one of these line items that evaporates because there's no money for anything else.
Kind of going off of that a little bit, I know in this new world, there's a lot of new budgeting aspects and scheduling aspects. So have either one of you found that you've needed to either up your budget or up your prep days, or, the scheduling and budgeting side, like what has been different and what still needs to improve, I guess?
Doug, you want to have a first crack at that? I know you've got stuff to say.
Fortunately, I'm not in charge ultimately of a budget. That's kind of handed, although I work with the producer to find out what kind of a budget we have. And I'm a big fan, I always have been, of planning, even though there is a small cost in prep, but I just think prep saves money because everyone knows what's going on. So you don't have to get equipment that won't be needed. You don't have to spin your wheels doing things that won't ultimately end up in the final show. To really think outside of the box, I actually think even doing some kind of, it would be helpful to producers if we did some kind of a pre-tech consultation or communication where we got together on a Zoom call and said, here's how it affects my department budget-wise. So then the producer will be able to put that into the budget. Because a lot of times once the budget's set, you have to deal with it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's the commercial space is tricky, because you have a client, they have a budget, the agency has their budget for that client. And, by the time crew is involved, it's really too late, and I get it. I totally get what producers are having to deal with. I mean, I hate to be a producer in these last, 15 years as the budgets have gotten so silly. I think it's a very thankless job. I feel bad for those cats, but that's where we're at.
Time-wise, I know these safety protocols are very important, but they also take time. They kind of slow down the process a little bit. Have you found that to be true? Like, what are the specific things that are slowing things down? Are there any solutions, or should we just keep, respect the time that it needs to take to get these things done?
Well, I'll go back to prep, and that if it's prepped right, then you can actually follow some of the safety protocols. Because we know, well, this room here is going to be designated for camera gear. And then it's a lot easier if you have that space set aside and everyone knows it, that then you can stay within the safety protocols. And the same thing goes for sort of having, each department taking turns on set. If you follow the process, which, typically in the olden days, it used to be block, light, rehearse, tweak, shoot. And if everyone knows that's going to happen, then they won't be kind of fighting for time on set. And then we can truly work together. And it's a difficult thing. But I actually think it could save time. If we truly followed it, it would make things more efficient.
There's no doubt about that. And that goes back to the set stream thing. If you give the crew this position where they can have their phone or their tablet, they don't need to be on the set, but they can follow along, make their notes, and then once we've done with the blocking and the lighting, we can take those notes on, and adjust accordingly, and then have a last look and shoot. Yeah, if you make it known that, look, everyone's going to get their turn, let's just do this piece by piece, then I think that would help.
Going back to the kind of the workflow, kind of like what we're talking about, like the way it used to be and everything. I guess the new version of that, what I keep hearing mentioned, is like zones and pods. Have the sets you've been working recently, have they utilized that system? Has it worked?
think to some extent, there's definitely been the use of that. But again, I sort of feel without the proper location and the ability to distance properly, the zone thing doesn't really matter anymore. So you need the space to do this. I really think space, good air exchange, and obviously sanitation and mask wearing are like the four things to sort of live and die by. And then having the room to do all those things effectively is super important. And I think going into winter, it is going to be really, really challenging. Like my advice to producers going into winter is, listen, just do it on a stage. Do it on a stage so you have the room to really spread everyone out. I don't know, Dougie, what do you think? Like,
I agree. I haven't worked on a stage, but I think in the pod system, it makes complete sense because you can designate those areas in prep beforehand where they are, and then hopefully you can stick to them because they won't change. The reality of what happens if things aren't planned and prepped on location is that it changes, and all of a sudden that room needs to be cleared out where all the, we were thinking that's a safe area, and it needs to be moved, and it needs to be moved fairly quickly, and things get scattered and they get mixed up. And now this whole great idea of keeping things separate and clean, just goes right out the window. So
yeah, that's, I think, the thing. It's just having the space to do it right.
Common theme I'm finding is prep and location. Those are the gold standards right now.
Because the great thing about a stage is you can create one-way systems. Typically, most stages, you could say, okay, everyone's going to enter through this door and leave through that door. And now you don't have these choke points where you got people forced to go within 6 feet of each other, which in a location, if you got lucky, you could do it. Maybe if the house was set up right and you had side paths on the outside of the house and you could do a one-way system, would be great. But yeah, it's tricky for sure.
I know, Doug, we talked a little earlier and you were talking about how you trying to find ways to make it work on set, like with the location you have. And you mentioned lighting outside, like those little things. Like what have you found, like that type of, I guess, tips and tricks that have worked?
Well, I've only had a couple shoots where that sort of was at play, and it works great. And it's something, again, that 15, 20 years ago, it was a lot more popular to light outside with, it does require bigger lights. It requires control, usually requires generators to power those lights, unlike the modern day lights that require less power. But what it gives you is, one, it clears a lot of gear out of a small space, that grip and lighting stuff. And it sort of forces the hand of, the block that the actor's blocking. You can't just change your mind and have them, go into another room because it's not lit. So it sort of puts some parameters around some things. And I think that is a good thing. And it also, in my opinion, looks beautiful because it's more natural, and that is how sort of the way light works. But it's certainly doable, and I think there's a way to sort of incorporate new lights and new technology with that in sort of a hybrid fashion, I think.
Yeah, and I think too, for location, managers, if we're taking that as an approach, which personally I think is a great approach, is find locations that you can light from the outside. Yeah, A, it's going to look way more beautiful and far better. But B, yeah, it makes a huge difference on the footprint on the set.
As an AD, have you found yourself have a whole new set of responsibilities, keeping everyone safe, or is it kind of now you're working alongside with the COVID supervisor? What has your role changed at all?
Again, I'm my thing is about getting everyone home in one piece, the same way they arrived on set, and being safe. And so this is just an expansion of that. I'll ask of them. I'll be like, so what's your plan for the day? Da, 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 da. And most of the time they're a good plan. But if I feel like there's something missing from that plan, I'll say so. I'll say, so are you going to be going around wiping high touch at, surfaces like door handles, blah, 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 blah. And if they say, oh, I hadn't thought of that, I say, well, I'd love that to happen. So then because there should be someone doing that, you know, like there should be someone, you know, every 30 minutes just doing the rounds, just constantly going around and touching door handles with, you know, disinfecting everything as they go. And same for the crew, you know, like the proper amount of PPE for me should be that everyone has their own hand sanitizer bottle. And on top of that, you know, I like a PA to go around and offer up sanitizers so that people who are like not tracking it, just like drinking water on a hot day, a lot of people just don't do it and they need that reminder.
It's super helpful to have people sort of watching your backs. I like it when people say, hey, you guys are too close. I just forgot.
And I think for the most part, like, I feel like we're pretty lucky in Washington because we have, you know, good crews, you know, and the people are quote unquote smarter than your average cat, you know? And so I think for the most part, everyone's really invested in doing what they can to protect the people they work with. And also, you know, we're a big sort of Carney family in our little crew bubble here. And so everyone likes each other and they don't want so-and-so to end up on a ventilator, right? So I do feel like when I look around at the crew for the most part, like everyone is really, you know, doing a solid job with their mask wearing, do a solid job with their hand washing and the hand sanitizing, you know, wiping down gear and doing what they can to make it safe. So I do feel like I haven't felt yet, let me put it this way, like I haven't come away yet from a job thinking, shit, I don't think I should go to work anymore. It's just, it's too dangerous still. Like, I think it's doable. Like, I do think this is doable, but I do think it's on everybody to have impeccable hygiene and good distancing.
Okay, one last question. So are there any of these protocols or these new production norms that you hope will be sort of implemented into the future of film production, like post-COVID, hopefully once we're all out of this?
As far as like things for the new future, I'd love to see a new process. I think we're ready for a new process, taking into account technology. And I think the process would allow the directors to even do more. In other words, if they feel like they can communicate their vision to the crew and the crew can develop that more than what they ever thought, it will only make for a better sort of production. So that, in other words, we can do a lot more with a lot less when everyone on the crew is being utilized.
It is interesting though, because it's like, it sounds so easy when you say it. Like this,
I know,
you know, but there are, you know, and we've all been on these productions, but there are productions that are just broken before they began. And when you're on that train, you're never in a position of balance. You are always backfooting it. You're always trying to get rescinded, and you just never get ahead of it.
And the positive spin, though, is when you're on a production where people have worked together a lot and they sort of know each other well enough to just be honest. And then all of a sudden people are coming up with this great stuff. All of a sudden, you know, the key grip throws out a line that the director goes, that's brilliant, I'm going to use that. And it's that kind of collaboration. Everyone who's been on very many shoots, they know when that magic is happening, when everyone's together and we get it and we know where we're going and you get there fast.
Yeah, it's pretty satisfying when it's going that way.
Those moments where you feel the magic happening and everyone's working together for movie magic.
Yep.
Right.
Great. Oh, thank you guys so much for sitting down and chatting with me today. Like, this was great for me to learn your guys' perspective, and I hope it was great for you to sort of vent it out and talk it out.
Good. And I think it'd be great to hear from all the other departments too.
Yeah.
I'm sure that's not part of the plan, but it'd be really good to see what all the ladies and gents out there are experiencing in their worlds, so that we all have more empathy for what we all do. And I think it'd be a good thing, definitely.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, we have a couple more lined up for sure of people from different departments, so we get all the different perspectives and everything. So stay safe out there, and keep making your movie magic, and I'm sure we'll talk to you soon.
You will.
Thanks,
all
guys.
Right, thanks.
Thank
Stay
you.
safe, gang.
Bye.
Bye.
Yes.